Hey, it's Sam, and I'm doing this live broadcast today here in anticipation of the upcoming full moon in Aries, the lunar eclipse, which is happening November 8th, 2022. It's going to be in Aries, Rashi. Like I said, this full moon. This sign of Aries has to do with personal will and individuality. It's a lunar eclipse, though, so these things are being magnified and exacerbated and really blown up. It's in Bharani Nakshatra, which is a nakshatra that relates to restraint. The Lord is Yama. And it actually literally also relates to the womb of the woman, the birth canal. That's the symbol. So I'm going to be talking about that and even how the previous solar eclipse that happened in Bharani Nakshatra happened right when the memo was leaked about Roe v. Wade, and now we have an election coming up about those things. So you're going to see a reverberation of these themes on these eclipses in this class as well. And I'm going to be talking about it as it relates to your life, your, personal relationships. It's really a lot about the self versus the other. A lot of this sort of polarizing, because this is the Libra Aries axis, and also in world events that kind of translates into things like what we would call tyranny versus liberty, right? We're seeing so much of this played out on both sides of whether it's politics or social, strata. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, please, before I get started, give some feedback. Share this with others. If this is something that you benefit from, share it. I spend time putting these things together, and I think it could really help you and help others. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to be updated about other offerings, whether it's through YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or wherever you're watching this. It does really help me and also improves the algorithm so that it gets higher in the rankings. I also want to let people know, and I just dropped a link in the comments, that a great way to learn Vedic astrology is through books. And I've written two, very much best-selling books. And you can get them at the website getsamsbooks.com. One is called Yoga and Vedic Astrology. The other one is called The Ascendant, 108 Planets of Vedic Astrology. And so this is a screenshot from the website. You can click sign up now and pay for the books. A great discount on them. I don't always have it open and offered, but it is now. If you did want to learn Vedic astrology, you could look them up on Amazon and see all the favorable reviews as well. So that's an option if you're interested in that. So let's get started with the update here. As you can see, the previous solar eclipse happened in Aries, and it was also in Bharani Nakshatra. And as you can see, this is the one that's coming on October 8th, where the moon is being eclipsed in Bharani Nakshatra. You see the sun is down here. But the previous eclipse that we had, the previous solar eclipse, was also in Bharani Nakshatra. And again, we look at the solar eclipses just like we had the solar eclipse a couple weeks ago, or, in down here in Libra. That was, what was that date again? I don't remember. October 25th, I think. I don't remember the exact date, but that's when the solar eclipse happened. And you see these lunar and solar eclipses sort of mirror each other. So this is a recurrence from the previous eclipse. This lunar eclipse is happening where we had the solar eclipse the last time. And so again, as you see, that previous solar eclipse was in Aries and in Bharani Nakshatra. Now we have the lunar eclipse in Aries and in Bharani Nakshatra now. So this is what's called a recurrence. There's a lot of recurrences. For example, your birthday is a recurrence transit of the sun, but every month you have a recurrence of the moon. Every couple of years you have a recurrence of Mars, etc. So anytime the same thing comes back, it's referring back to a cycle. Particularly with eclipses, this is when the lunar nodes, when that nodal axis, which we're all being influenced by, bursts into consciousness and bursts into our life. It's always there, kind of hanging around, but then we have the eclipses and it's like, okay, now, bam, here it is. And it's always happening in a different house based on your ascendant. But one thing that we do know are these, or is the specifics of what the sign archetype means. And for this Aries Libra axis, particularly right now, it's very much a self and other kind of energy. Now, the eclipse that we had in April, as you see, it was the sun that was in Aries. So it was very much about me, the self, my power, my self-will, asserting my self-will. Now we're halfway into that, and we're recalibrating that and saying, but how much does my self-will really worth if it's not connected to others? So this eclipse that we just had in Libra is very much where we are evaluating our compromises, our trade-offs. Of course, that shows up in the forms of our relationships, but it's too simplistic to just say it's relationships. Everybody's not in a romantic relationship, for example, or if you are, maybe that part is of your agreement life is worked out pretty well, but maybe business agreements aren't as embodied, or other types of compromises and relationships where it's two equals involved in a transaction, because that's really what Libra is. This is what you're working through now. So that could be business agreements, any kind of transactional relationships where you get this much, I get this much, where we share equally, where it's mutual respect, all of that. This is the big theme that we're working on right now. And what this lunar eclipse in Aries is going to do is it's going to really, again, reawaken all of this self-will. Because we're very much now, with the solar eclipse that just happened in Libra, we're very much aware of how weak our personal vision can be when we get in a relationship or a partnership, or when we make an agreement. Suddenly that agreement means I have to accommodate what you want equally to what I want. So I better make sure that the things I'm willing to negotiate away are not things that are more important than whatever it is I'm getting back in return. And if I'm not sure what those things are, if I'm not sure what I can give up and the price I'm willing to pay for the thing that I'm willing to get, because again, it's driven by your desires. Okay, the reason you're making the agreement is because you want something. Let's say, just in a very simple way, if it's a relationship, you want sex, you want connection, you want affection. So what are you willing to give up in order to get that? How much time, money, energy, self-respect, whatever it is. So you better know yourself. And again, that's the Aries part of the equation. You better know yourself well enough to know what you're willing to give up on. If you don't have a strong sense of self, then the compromises and the agreements you're willing to trade off are going to wind up aggravating you and irritating you, and you're going to then project and blame the other person for it and things like that. Someone said Libra is less about love and more about reciprocity. Yes. In fact, it's not even less about love. In fact, it's not about love at all, really. Again, that might sound cynical, but it's not. It's just truth. It's about desire. Desire is not love. When you want something, again, it doesn't exclude it, but it's not related to it. It's somewhat related, but not really. Like you love your dog or your child, but you don't necessarily want anything from it. The act of giving to it is the reward. That's really what you call love. Love is, my guru Amma says, love isn't an emotion, it's a flow. That's a great way to look at it. Actual love. Like I love my work. I love tennis. These are things I love, right? And I don't necessarily want anything from them. I don't want to, I take money for my work and I spend my time doing these things, but I do them for the love of doing them, right? And of course, when you can make a living at something like that you love, but when it gets into like romantic relationships or interactions with other people, it's not because of love. Now I like them and I want to be connected and I want to grow and expand, and I feel good when they also feel good about what we share. but it's not necessarily based on love. Much of the time, in fact, it's not. And this is the important thing, especially like business agreements and other things like that. They're not about love at all. They're about mutual benefit. We want something. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Everything is not about love or whatever you might say. And again, so this is a lot of illusion around Libra and a lot of the illusion around relationships and whatnot. Like business relationships. I got to get involved with people in business or whatever who not only don't I love them, I don't even really like them sometimes. Like I don't like interacting with them. But I do it because the thing that I get that they also get, the mutual benefit, is worth it ultimately. Or it's not. It's not worth the headache of interacting with them to get whatever benefit. Okay. So again, this is good negotiations, and you have to be dialed into those things where you know what's the price you're willing to pay for that thing. And Sean said that's why Venus is exalted in Pisces, right? So the ruler is exalted in Pisces, where it's a transcendent joy. But Libra is where we do the transaction very well here on Earth. So again, Libra is the transactional quality of life here on Earth. We see it most exacerbated and most dramatic, dramatized in our romantic relationships because our desires are very much on the line. But it doesn't have to be that. It's in all negotiations. And you can see how well a person does in their romantic relationship based on their other relationships, right? They're not really separate. You'll see how they'll handle those things based on how they handle all relationships. So this is a big thing right now. And with this full moon in Aries, we're now really getting more and more aware, and this eclipse, of the compromises we've made and the trade-offs we've made and how they restrain us. Because again, it's Bharani Nakshatra where we feel restrained and impinged upon and even maybe oppressed by the other person. Again, if we're not dialed in and if we've compromised and traded off those things that are actually deeply held convictions, which is what Mars is there to defend, Aries is there to establish your healthy sense of self-will and boundaries and those things that you're willing to fight for. If you've given those things away because you want the connection more than you want the integrity, then what you're going to do instead is fight with that other person as if they're to blame. They're not to blame. You're to blame, and it's an opportunity for you to learn to hold that line of integrity with more discipline. And there's a reason why you don't do it, because you don't want to break connection, because you want the connection. So again, this is where we get into a quandary in relationships. We want the connection and we want the integrity, but sometimes you can't have both. That's why you need to be clear about where the line has to be drawn, and you have to draw it and be willing to say, that's too high of a price to pay. And if I have to pay that price, it's better that we don't do it. But again, that's very hard. It's easy to say it, hard to do it. Because when you want to get with that person, let's say in a romantic relationship, that's why it's hard. Because when you want to have sex with that person and be affectionate with that person and do all of that, all of those convictions sometimes just fly out the window. And we have to learn, wait a minute, that wasn't worth it. I paid too high of a price for that connection and to satisfy that desire. So this is the way to understand it. Libra is not driven by love. It's driven by desire. That's what Venus is driven by. It's Rajasic. It's not Sattvic. Go back to the gunas. They never steer you wrong. The thing that drives it is the desire, not the love. So this is a big part of, on a personal level, what's happening. This polarizing around the compromises that you've made and the awakening of perhaps some frustration and some projection and angry projection onto those who are being mean to you and doing this kind of thing. I've had a lot of this in my life, not necessarily on some personal relationship stuff lately, but mainly business type stuff and whatnot, where I have to be careful, like, okay, and, tempted to get angry about certain things, but I've been through it enough at this point in my life where once you go through it and once you learn this stuff, you don't keep making the same dumb mistakes over and over again. It doesn't mean that the karmas don't keep coming back. They do. We're still having karma, but we don't keep going down the same, falling off the same cliff over and over again and then landing on our head and going, what just happened? Oh, no, we see it now. So when we have these socially, there's a lot of things that are showing this now. And again, particularly one of the big things that are happening, people have been asking about, this lunar eclipse happens on election day here in the USA. Can't make this stuff up, right? November 8th. It's big election day here in the United States. It's big, not just for the USA, but for the world, because it's a big one where our governing bodies can fall in the hands of, change hands, going Democrats, Republicans, or whatever. But what I found to be one of the most interesting is the last time we had this eclipse that I just talked about. As you see here on the screen, abortion rights are huge in this upcoming election. The last time when those leaked documents came out, which suggested what we knew was going to come, which was that the Supreme Court was going to strike down Roe v. Wade, that happened actually 2 days after the solar eclipse in Bharani, Nakshatra, the last time. That's when everybody knew that this was going to happen. 2 days after the solar eclipse in Bharani, which is symbolized by the uterus. And we have the courts taking away the right, the guaranteed federal right. And now 6 months later, we're having an election on that same day. And it's a referendum. So this is what it's showing. Okay, people get outraged by this, but are they outraged enough to show up and vote these people out of office? Are they outraged enough to do anything? Let's see. I will tell you that not just based on the current polling, which seems to be skewing toward Republicans, which says they're not going to get voted out of office. This is Aries, it's Bharani, and you see the same energy that said you don't get the right is now the day that everybody's voting. So what could happen, and what people thought when the courts did this was, okay, wait till the next election, we're going to vote them out, and then that will be an opportunity, let's say, to go back and recodify Roe v. Wade, because if the Democrats did get both the Senate and the House, they could, and get some other people to, not to get so into the weeds with politics, but vote against to override the filibuster and then codify it. All this could go away if the Democrats did take both chambers. It could, but looks like it's not going to. And again, this is an honest expression. People get outraged. Do they get outraged enough to show up and vote and do something about it? There's so much apathy in the country and in the world now, especially with people, I'd say, on the left, because they're not enthusiastic about Biden and Harris and the Democrats, because the Democrats are so feckless as well. They're like, they're not inspiring. So again, the apathy. Now, maybe there's a possibility, because again, this is a node, and these eclipses are very surprising, and it's Aries, it's a lunar eclipse. I think it's possible that they could also shock the world and show up and take back, especially the Senate. It's a shocking, unexpected, surprising result is definitely not out of the realm of possibility, especially with the fact that this is happening on an eclipse. It could very well be, someone just said, it says Repubs are gaming the polls, reporting small R only polls. This could be possible, but again, you see races tightening all over the place, where, again, let's see what happens. And I'm not basing everything on polls either, by the way. I'm definitely not. But I'm saying that it would have seemed like, if there would been the trends that we had expected, that people had expected, that by the time we got to this era, you would see gigantic numbers, especially against people like, well, look at the Herschel Walker in Georgia who come and says he wants a national ban on abortion, and it turns out he's paid for 3 of them himself. Just the utter hypocrisy. I'm not going to get into all this. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but it appears as though they're not going to get voted out, and that in fact it could be a Republican takeover, and that would also comport with Aries. With the Aries is really the sign of like tyranny, dictatorship, and domination of any of the zodiac signs, even more than Leo and whatnot. So the fact that this is happening in Aries shows that it could very well be what especially those on the left fear the most, which is that they're going to take back both chambers, and then who knows where we're at. So that was a story that came. Another one was Elon Musk. This just resolved here. But the last time we had the eclipse in April, this whole thing was being talked about a lot. Like, what's it going to mean if Elon Musk buys Twitter and actually takes it over? And, this kind of, situation develops. It happened a couple weeks before that eclipse. So it was in the eclipse window. And by the time the eclipse happened, we were definitely looking at the possibility that now you have like one guy owning this social media platform where there's so much power concentrated in one person's hands. What is that going to mean? Well, again, those saying that it's going to be great, those saying it's going to be bad. But what it definitely is again, one person. It's not a democratization anymore. It's not a committee. It's not even a company that's public with shareholders and with board of directors. It's one guy. It's like, this is my thing now, and I get to do what I want with it. And so that has now resolved. And he now owns it, and he do what the heck he wants with it. Again, whether you think it's good or bad, again, this is a recurrence transit, and we're seeing this play out now. So going back to the previous eclipse in Aries, we're seeing now the solar eclipse at like the same point and same issues coming up. The other thing that also happened, again, and I remember it very clearly because I track this all the time, the last eclipse right before it was when the January 6th committee, which had been convened for a while, announced that they were going to be doing hearings. Again, public hearings. They announced it right before the solar eclipse in Aries. And again, so those hearings have, at least for now, have ended. But one of the interesting developments, I'm not sure, I think it's even going to happen, but we've seen recently, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, as I predicted, Trump was subpoenaed again, which is his legal troubles in a lot of ways are still mounting. He could be indicted any day because he's done so many things that are indictable that it's not even really in question. But this, I don't know, last week or even a few days ago or whenever it was, he was said to be in negotiations with the January 6th panel to give sworn testimony. I'm not saying I think it's going to happen, but there could be some very interesting things that play out even in the next few weeks, relative especially to Trump's legal status. Again, not saying a prediction that he's going to actually formally get indicted or anything like that. Again, that could happen at any time. It's not even an interesting prediction at this point because it could happen at any time. But you might see some shocking thing like where he does actually, give a sworn testimony. Again, I kind of doubt it'll happen because for several reasons, but you could see more of that in the news as well. But the point is that I think it's really interesting to see how these eclipses bring these same issues back. Again, 6 months ago, unprecedented move where the court not unilaterally, but they, it is unilateral because they weren't voted in. And when they were voted in, they said they weren't going to touch Roe v. Wade, that it was settled law of the land, and then they do very quickly. That came out in public consciousness that we knew that was going to happen right after the last full moon in Aries in Bharani. Now here we are, the election that was going to be the referendum to say, okay, you do this, we're going to vote you out. All of you Republicans who want this to happen as well, who elected them and who now, and by the way, the issue has done nothing but grow, which we also knew was going to happen back then. They're now, it's national ban on abortion. The Republican Party, it's like the plank. They'll be going after gay rights and these other rights next, and affirmative action is up. All of this stuff, the opportunity or the potential to vote them out is there. Let's see if it happens. Whether it does or not, you see the issue here. It suddenly exploded into mass consciousness, the last eclipse. Now here we are again revisiting it. And as far as the other things as well, I find it to be a fascinating case study. And you know, these things are you know, hot button issues for others, and I don't feel like diving all the way down into all that and turning it into a circus. I'm showing it mainly as an astrological case study. You know, full disclosure, I'm definitely progressive in the sense of thinking that there should be progress, not regress, like taking away choice and things like that. I don't think it's going to be very, you know, beneficial to progress and to free exchange of dialogue to have Elon Musk owning Twitter and doing whatever he wants with it. I think it's quite dangerous. We'll see what happens, okay? But we're on the precipice of some very shaky times. And again, the one party that is, if they do take back both houses, both chambers, they're, you know, something like 190 election deniers who deny the last election was valid. There's, you know, a real commitment to rolling back human rights in this, especially in things like abortion and all kinds of things. In this country, those views are not majority views. And so, but one of the problems is the apathy on the left. You can't get these people out to vote. And let's see what happens again. But so many that I see, again, in the spiritual circles and whatnot, they've kind of been like, oh, well, you know, don't rely on the government to save you and blah, blah. Yeah, I get it. Don't rely on the government to save you. They're not going to save you, but they can definitely take away your rights. They can definitely do all this kind of stuff. And so we'll see what happens with, we're outraged enough to get out and protest, but are we outraged enough to be inconvenienced to go vote and actually make change? So these, you know, these events are recurring as we speak. So anyway, I dropped the link here again. If you are interested in learning more about astrology and whatnot, you know, I have books you can read. They're very informative. They've been very well received. You can go to the link that I dropped in there. And either way, I hope that on a personal level, you're really working through a lot of these, you know, issues with self and others, compromise, and really looking at and examining the trade-offs that you've made in order to have the connections that you have. And if they're not what you wanted, rather than project out and blame others and fight, introspect about where your line of integrity was compromised in order to have the connection that you wanted. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's also not the other person's fault if you did it. It's up to you to hold that line of integrity. No one can disrespect you for long. They can do it maybe once or twice, but then you have to be willing to say, no, I can't do that, and know what that line is, and be willing to be alone rather than to be in a compromise and an agreement that makes you feel disrespected. If that happens, you're doing it at that point. and you can keep blaming the person, but ultimately you're the one who is stuck. The problem is we want both. We want the desire and the connection, and we want the respect, and we want the integrity. And so this is where we start fighting. And so learning how to voice those things, learning how to, again, stay connected to your sense of, dignity toward the other person, and those lines that can't be crossed is really the biggest thing that is really coming forth now during this on a personal level. So again, I hope this was helpful for you. You take care.